Hey, feature weapon enthusiasts, I'm Nick Young, the CEO of Desert Tech. And for the past 18 years, I've been designing and producing premium rifle systems. And we're going through a series of comparison videos where we take the elite rifle systems that the U.S. military uses, and we put them head to head against our Wolverine and Saber-tooth rifle systems. We're pretty excited to have our hands on the new NGSW SIG rifle, the XM7. Now, we competed against this rifle with our NGSW rifle here. For those of you that don't know, we had polymer ammunition in a custom 6.8 cartridge, and it was pretty neat system. Unfortunately, SIG prevailed, and so we're going to do a deep dive in the XM7 rifle here today. This is part one in the video series we're going to do, but we're doing a head-to-head comparison between this rifle and our latest generation Wolverine rifle systems to see what was so special about this gun, and to see if our Wolverine or Saber-tooth rifles could offer more than what you see here. So the things we're going to go over in this video is first my initial impressions of the rifle. This is the first I have had my hands on the gun that wasn't at a trade show, and we purchased this weapon for the testing that we're going to be doing. But we're going to talk about initial impressions, compare the specifications between the XM7 and our Wolverine systems, and then we're going to talk about the biomechanics of the SIG versus the Wolverine. So please like this video and subscribe to our channel and click that notifications bell so when the part 2 gets published that you'll get notified and be able to watch it too. For those of you not familiar with the NGSW program, this is a new 6.8 by 51 cartridge, essentially a SBR 6.5 Creedmoor with slightly superior ballistics, and it was adopted to replace all of the M4s. So I got a Mark 18 rifle right here, but this was supposed to be the replacement for the M4 rifle systems across the board. So initial impressions of the SIG, the first one being the recoil spring is extremely stiff. Now I know it uses 80,000 PSI ammo, but the spring is very stiff. And one of the issues that we had with that is it's very difficult to release the bolt on the left side of the weapon. So no matter how hard I pushed on the bolt, then it would not release on an empty magazine. So I attribute that to the stiff recoil spring and the lack of leverage on this side of the lever. Now, we didn't have any issues with releasing the bolt on the right side. It was still stiff, but it has a leverage advantage over here that allows that bolt to drop. So essentially, if you're going to be running the XM7, I would highly advise using the bolt release on the right side of the weapon. The other issue with the bolt release on the left side is if you have your charging handle locked back, it's pretty close to this bolt release button, and I could see a situation where you'd get your finger whacked on releasing the side charging handle if it was in the rearward position. Now, changing magazines, this would normally be locked forward, so it's not that big of a deal, but that was just one thing that I observed. Another point of concern is the T-handle charging handle is very thin. Now, the size of it wouldn't normally be a concern, but with the recoil spring being so extremely stiff, it does raise some eyebrows. So the next observation was in evaluating the handguard. So the alignment with the top Picatinny of the handguard actually goes off to the right, and so your top Picatinny goes forward, and then the handguard is actually crooked and it's poking off to the right a couple degrees, and you can see it by nature of the barrel. The barrel is off to the side. I don't know if this is going to pick it up on the camera, but you can very obviously see that that barrel is not collinear with the handguard. So it's the fault of the handguard, because when you look at the top Picatinny, you can definitely see that the handguard shoots off to the right. Now, is this going to be an issue in the field? No, it won't, because if you mounted any kind of enabler on the front Picatinny, you're going to adjust to 0 anyway. So that misalignment does not really matter. It's just something that I don't think should be there. It's off pretty far. And some other observations with the handguard is we saw There was a nice smudge in the paint right here. Very likely somebody touched it during the painting operation, as well as some of the cutouts in the handguard had some pretty sharp corners, and those corners did not anodize very well. And you can actually see the white showing through. Now, normally in production, then you would have kind of a deburr operation to take and knock those sharp corners down. And for the most part, everywhere else on the handguard has looks pretty good, but there's about 3 or 4 corners that really needed better attention to detail. Another observation was the mag catch design. So for whatever reason, the mag catch is split in half, and I don't know why they would engineer it like that. I'm expecting it's probably not going to fail. Otherwise, they would have changed the design. It just seems compromised having the center of the mag catch cut in half like that. And so that was very interesting, and I couldn't quite figure out why they did it that way. Moving to the buttstock, I did notice that the buttstock doesn't color match with the pistol grip. Now, I don't really care about color matching, but SIG did make extra effort to color match the handguard with the receivers by painting everything. And so with that kind of attention to detail, you would have thought that they would have made sure that their polymers color matched. And obviously one of them is made by SIG, another one is made by Magpul, so very, very likely they just bought it off the shelf stock and didn't bother to go through the effort of color matching. Now, in manipulating the stock, the stock release is very difficult to actuate. So they have a locking button on the left side, which I like that. So you push down on that locking button, then you pull up pretty hard on the stock, and it is pretty stiff. And with practice, you can get pretty good at it, but it's still quite difficult to actuate. Now, it might break in over time, but most of the time sometimes I don't have a problem with it. Sometimes I do have a problem with it. So I don't know why the inconsistency there, but just know that you want to practice actuating the side folder if you're going to be needing to know how to do that very quickly. So another observation on the stock is when the stock is folded to the side, depending on where the extended stock is located, will change how well it's retained to the side. You can see when it's fully collapsed, it almost doesn't retain to the side at all. You adjust it out one position and it gets better. You adjust it out another position, it gets better. You adjust it all the way out and it actually gets worse because now the stock is hitting the side charging handle. I would have liked to see a stock that was purpose designed for this gun and perhaps change the side charging handle so that when the stock is fully extended that it still locks into place, because it really just pushes it out from the side of the gun. I think they could have spent more effort in doing a stock design that was built for the rifle rather than just taking a shortcut and getting off the shelf stock that really does not conform to the side of the gun very well. The next observation is that they painted the upper receiver and the handguard to match. The lower receiver, I think, maybe anodized. It doesn't quite match the upper receiver. I don't really care about color matching, especially in FDE. You can't really get FDE anodized to ever match, no matter how hard you try, which is why SIG elected to paint the upper receiver and the handguard to color match. Now, the upper receiver is anodized black, and you can see that by looking at the internals. And they did get a little bit of overspray of the FDE color inside of the receiver. It's not going to cause any issues. It's just an observation. The next observation has to do with the magazines. So for the round marking points, they elected to put holes inside of the magazine. They're pretty small. I don't know how well people will be able to see in those holes. Obviously, they made them small to prevent ingress of debris. However, having a hole in the magazine does create opportunity for some kind of debris to get inside the gun. Wonder if maybe a polymer magazine with a window may have been a better option. The next observation is the barrel markings. For whatever reason, they tuck the barrel markings under the handguard, so it's pretty difficult to see them. I would have preferred to have them just in front of the handguard so it was easier to see the caliber without having to get a flashlight and look inside the handguard. The next observation is the weight. It's a pretty heavy gun, a very heavy gun, especially when you compare it to the M4, and it's very front heavy, so unfortunately. And we'll get into more details on the weight of the gun in our next segment. First off, we're going to compare the specifications between the SIG XM7 rifle and our Wolverine rifle system, which is the next generation developed rifle after our NGSW prototype that we put in the program. The XM7 is available in .308 Winchester and 6.8 by 51. And the 6.8 by 51 has two variants. One of them is an 80,000 PSI cartridge, which I believe shoots 140 grain projectile or 137 grain projectile. And then they have a standard like 60,000 PSI round that shoots 115 grain projectile. In our comparison testing, I don't know if we'll be able to get our hands on the 80,000 PSI ammo for the SIG. I hope we can. If anyone knows where to get it, please let me know. If not, it'll just be with the 115 grain bullet with maybe extrapolating, theoretical data with the higher pressure cartridge. Anyhow, as far as the Wolverine goes, this is available in 6.5 Creedmoor, .308 Winchester, 5.56 NATO, 300 Blackout, and a variety of different barrel lengths. So we got 4 different caliber options in this rifle. As far as barrel length goes, the SIG rifle that I have here has a 13.5-inch barrel, and this Wolverine rifle has a 16-inch barrel. The bullpup design allows us to get a substantially longer barrel in a substantially shorter package, as you see here. You can also get longer barrels for the Wolverine. This is a 20-inch barrel, and it's a 6.5. So you can get a 20-inch barrel in the 5.56 or the 6.5 Creedmoor or the .308 Winchester. You can see that even in a 20-inch barrel, this is substantially shorter than this 13.5-inch barrel SIG. So ballistic performance. As far as the 80,000 PSI ammo goes, the last information that I watched from SIG was that they had to bring the pressure down closer to 70,000 PSI in order to, I guess, get the accuracy and the reliability and longevity out of the guns that they wanted. So I don't know what that did to the velocity. I would expect that there would be a reduction in velocity going from 80,000 down to 70,000. Again, this is information that I saw that one of the SIG engineers mentioned in a video on YouTube. All the data that I have run shows that a 13.5-inch barreled 6.8 by 51 with a high pressure 80,000 PSI ammo is slightly superior to a 6.5 Creedmoor with a 20-inch barrel and standard ammo. But the data is very, very similar. I'll post up a picture of the ballistic comparison between the energy, the velocity, range, and so on and so forth here. So if bringing the pressure down to 70,000 PSI reduce the velocity very much, it really closes the gap and makes it very similar or near identical in performance to the 6.5 Creedmoor with a 20-inch barrel. So they would not have had to go crazy with their pressures and make a entirely new cartridge design if they was not so allergic to adopting a bullpup rifle system. So they could have just used a standard 6.5 and a longer barrel and achieved near identical performance to this rifle here. And there's a lot of other benefits that the bullpup rifle offers over conventional that we'll get into in a little bit. Next, we're going to compare the length. The length of the SIG with the 13.5-inch barrel and a silencer is 40.5 inches. This 16-inch barrel Wolverine with a Huxworks silencer is 33 inches. So you got 33 inches versus 40.5 inches. The length of a 20-inch barrel Wolverine, like the 6.5 here, with the Huxworks silencer is 36.75 inches. So this is about 4 inches shorter than the SIG and it has a 20-inch barrel versus a 13.5-inch barrel. Now, if you really want to go crazy short with the Wolverine, you can get a 11.5-inch barrel. So this barrel is only 2.5 inches. I guess this barrel is only 2 inches shorter than this barrel, and you got our Micron. So this thing with the suppressor is only 27.5 inches. So you got 27.5 inches versus 40.5 inches, and this is only 2 inches shorter barrel. So that is insanely short, like crazy, crazy short. You can collapse this stock on the XM7, and it does give you a shorter length, but you're still substantially shorter with the Wolverine and the bullpup design. There's your 16-inch barrel. So even with the stock collapsed, this would add maybe 2 inches in length compared to this. But this is a deployable length. You don't have a big, fat, chunky rifle to carry, and very quick to react and fire, not having to rapidly deploy your stock, as well as your sling ability. If you sling this guy up where it's comfortable, is it really going to be deployable? Because your stock's right there, and you got to swing it out. And if your sling is all tied up against your body, how deployable is that? Is it very comfortable to sling and carry? Or do you have to have a long bit of slack in your sling so that you could rapidly deploy this thing? Versus this guy, you can have your sling be nice and tied up against your body and still deploy it, because you're not having to swing your stock out and push your gun really far out and away from your body. The next factor is the weight of the rifle. The XM7 with a loaded magazine, a silencer, and no optic is 10.9 pounds. The weight of a Wolverine with a 20-inch barrel, Huxwork suppressor, and a loaded magazine with no optic is 10.6 pounds. So the weight of a 20-inch barrel Wolverine is 0.3 pounds lighter than the 13.5-inch barrel SIG. The weight of a 16-inch barrel Wolverine with a loaded magazine and a Huxwork suppressor and no optic is 10.4 pounds. The weight of the SIG XM7 rifle with a 13.5-inch barrel, SIG silencer, loaded magazine, and a SIG 1-to-6 power optic is 12.7 pounds. When you add the optic, it increases the weight to 12.7 pounds, and this is a 1-to-6 power SIG optic. The fire control optic Vortex supplies is about half a pound heavier than this. The weight of a 20-inch barreled Wolverine with a Huxwork suppressor, a loaded magazine, and this 18 power optic is 12.75 pounds. This optic, being 18 power, is roughly the same weight as the Vortex fire control optic. So this is a very good representation, at least weight-wise and balance-wise, of what the fire control optic would be like on the SIG. The weight of the 16-inch barrel Wolverine with a Huxwork silencer, a loaded magazine, and an optic is 12.05 pounds. All right, now we're going to talk about the biomechanics of each of the rifles. So biomechanics means designing the rifle to function ergonomically with the body of a person, the way that their arms move, the strength that their muscles have, the angles that their grip is on everything on the gun. And the SIG is not biomechanically optimized. And the reason I say that is because it's extremely forward heavy. Even though the SIG rifle weighs 12.7 pounds, as you see it here, the balancing point is at the back of the handguard right here, which makes it very barrel heavy. And that weight forward of the grip creates a leverage pressure, a rotational torque of the gun. And that rotational torque increases the effective weight burden by 8.1 pounds. So even though this is 12.7 pounds in weight, the effective weight burden of the gun adds 8.1 pounds, so it's 21.1 pounds. And the torque weight is not a linear stress. It's actually worse because the torque fights the rotation of the wrist. And so the muscles to combat the extra 8 pounds of torque are the flexors in the forearm. And these are not as strong as the biceps are. So if our balancing point was right in the middle and the grip was like this, then the bicep would take all of that force and we'd only have 12.7 pounds of effective weight burden. But pushing the weight out adds 8.1 pounds of torque. That's a pretty substantial amount of additional weight burden that people aren't really considering when they kit out their rifles. On the contrary, the Wolverine with a 20-inch barrel kitted out like you see it here has a balancing point right at the front of the grip here. And so you don't have any forward leverage that you're fighting. All of that 12.7 pounds is supported by the bicep and not the forearm flexors. So you have a much easier time managing and manipulating and maneuvering with a balanced rifle. So perfectly biomechanically optimized system. If we transition down to the Wolverine with a 16-inch barrel, the balancing point is just to the rear of the pistol grip right here. And what that does is it puts a little bit of rearward torque on the gun. However, when you have the gun shouldered, then the 0.4 pounds of rearward torque that's added to the effective weight burden is supported by the shoulder. So in reality, the weight at the grip is reduced by 0.4 pounds when you're shouldering the weapon. So this Mark 18 kitted out like you see it, optics, loaded magazine, suppressor, 10.3-inch barrel. This thing weighs 9.4 pounds as you see it. However, the effective weight burden increases by 4.7 pounds because our balancing point is at the front push pin here, which gives us a barrel heavy force, a torque force at the wrist. And so the effective weight of this rifle is really 14 pounds of burden that your muscles are experiencing. And so ironically, this Mark 18 10.3-inch barrel has an effective weight burden of 14 pounds. This 20-inch Wolverine has an effective weight burden of 14.3 pounds. So near identical effective weight burden, even though this is 9.4 pounds on a scale, and this is 12.7 pounds on a scale. That explains why when you're using a conventional rifle, it feels heavier than what it really is. And when you're using a bullpup rifle that is heavier on a scale, that it's easier to maneuver and manipulate and hold because of the effective weight burden benefit. So how significant is the effective weight burden? Well, we have a Mark 18 rifle kitted out at 9.4 pounds, but the effective weight burden increases to 14 pounds. On the contrary, we have a 16-inch barrel Wolverine that weighs 12 pounds kitted out like you see it, and its effective weight burden is 11.6 pounds. And so 11.6 versus 14. So even though the Mark 18 is 9.4 pounds and the 16-inch barrel Wolverine is 12 pounds, the effective weight burden of the Wolverine is 2.4 pounds less than the Mark 18. So, and you can really tell a difference as you're aiming these rifles that this perfectly optimized balance point has a substantial advantage over a rifle that is not optimized in its balance point. The next biomechanical feature we're going to talk about is the recoil stability factor. And what I mean by that is how much does the gun move under recoil, how fast can you recover from shots, and how stable it is during firing in rapid fire or fully automatic modes of fire. So what determines that is the position of the recoil force compared to the point of stability. So the point of stability is the pistol grip here, and our recoil force on the SIG is at the barrel, at the bolt head on the lugs. As the weapon fires, it pushes back on those lugs, and that force is occurring forward of the pistol grip. And when a force occurs in front of a point of stability, it is naturally unstable. However, if the force occurs behind the point of stability, then it is naturally stable. And so in this situation, you're going to have a lot of movement and unstable firing with the force being in front of the point of stability. Now, there is a secondary recoil force that happens when the bolt carrier impacts the back of the receiver, and in this situation it impacts right about at the pistol grip. So you got forward force and then maybe more of a neutral force on the recoil of the bolt carrier. The Wolverine, however, has substantially superior recoil stability because the recoil forces are behind the grip and the point of stability. And so you have natural stability with those recoil forces occurring back here. And the secondary recoil factor is our bolt carrier impacting the back of the receiver. And so both of these forces are substantially behind the point of stability, making it naturally stable. And in part 2 of this video, we're going to illustrate that stability with live fire through the optic and on target so that you can see the rifle doesn't move around like it does with a forward recoil force. The last biomechanical feature is the handling factor between the rifles. The handling factor means how easy is it to rapidly move the rifle, how much is the gun going to move off target under any kind of firing situation. And with the SIG, it's very long and very front heavy. And that gives that a pretty substantial leverage disadvantage. And so if I'm trying to rapidly transition between targets, I'm fighting the weight of moving the rifle and the weight of stopping the rifle on target, as well as obviously having to support the gun out front. And just by nature, this long protruding barrel is going to cause a lot more deviation in everything that happens and occurs as you're moving and firing the rifle. Whereas with the Wolverine not having the weight clear out there and the length clear out there, it's very easy to very rapidly move around. I'm not fighting any kind of leverage disadvantage of weight as I transition from one target to another. And again, we're going to show you live fire demonstrations of target transitions to show what happens on the crosshair of the gun as you're trying to get it started and you're trying to slow it down, as well as just the deviation of the movement of the barrel as it's being fired. I hope you enjoyed part 1 of our SIG versus Wolverine comparison. Part 2, we're hoping to be on the range and doing live fire demonstrations. I have a 3-gun friend who shoots conventional rifles all the time, and I want to invite him to be a part of these tests so that you can see an independent party that is more versed in conventional rifles doing shooting comparisons between these head-to-heads to see truly the advantage that is achieved with the bullpup system. Please like this video and subscribe to the channel so that you can stay tuned for part 2. Thanks for watching.